And now here's an astrological minute from Ralph and Lahni and Planetary Calendars. And we may go longer than a minute because we're a little wordy.
Yes.
But we give tips on, interesting information about how to use astrology more.
Exactly.
We thought we'd talk about retrograde planets because that's always something that makes you have to change direction.
Yeah. And sometimes you get a whole bunch of retrogrades cropping up in 1 month, and it makes it very disruptive. You feel like you're always putting the brakes on. You were moving along, things were going so well, and all of a sudden, geez, we just got like stalled.
We have so many clients who call us and say, "What's retrograde? Because my life is going a little crazy."
Exactly.
And that's kind of the energy. Planetary energies are meant to be emanate out. Mm-hmm. And when they go retrograde, they appear from our position on the earth that the planets are moving backwards. And sometimes projects that you're doing appear to go backwards for a while, or things get internalized. And of course, of all the bodies in the solar system, the sun and the moon never go retrograde because of our perspective from here on earth. But we could start out with Mercury, the closest planet to the sun, and talk about each retrograde and the kind of effect that it has in your daily life.
Just to get us started with the retrogrades, what it actually means is that it appears to be moving backwards, but of course the planet's not moving backwards. And many years ago, astronomers were continually coming up with all these incredibly complex things, thinking about what planets did that they actually backed up in the sky. But it's as simple as the fact that when you're sitting in a train, and there's a train next to you going the same direction, and you're seen to be going the same direction, and all of a sudden the other train slows down, all of a sudden it seems to be moving backwards. It's still moving forward, but it appears to be moving backwards due to your perspective. And that's really very similar to what happens when a planet appears to be moving backwards in the sky.
That's a really good analogy. I think everybody can really understand that. I've even had experience that stopped at a light and a car starts to move, and I think they're moving backwards or I'm moving backwards, and that's a really good explanation.
It's all in our perspective.
So Mercury is the one that has people pulling their hair out.
Yes.
And Mercury goes retrograde more often than any other planets, again, because of our perspective and its position so close to the sun, and we're looking inwards to the sun at it. And Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year, each time for 3 weeks. And so because the rulership of Mercury is communications or short distance travel or children, and your nervous system, all these things that are rulerships of the planet Mercury, these are the things that seem to lose their forward motion when it looks like Mercury is moving backwards. You say, didn't I do this already? Didn't we talk about this? Communications, from anything from talking to email, to sending snail mail.
Doing errands.
Errands is a good one. Conversations with little children.
It's the kind of thing that's especially annoying because Mercury controls the nervous system. So the spot where you're most often annoyed is where the problems are cropping up. The place where you notice it, it's right there.
Well, and because of Mercury's rulership of children, it's kind of like when Mercury's working properly, Mercury is in the toy store. Yeah. He's on a mission. He knows what he wants to find. He wants to look at everything, And then it goes retrograde. And it's kind of like being in that same toy store with Daddy, holding your hand just a little too tight.
Right.
And so it's 3 weeks of a struggle.
Yes.
To try to get your will.
Yes. It's basically trying to get your kid to clean out their room.
And so when this energy gets, this communication, which is an externalized energy, gets turned inward, there's a lot of self-talk. There's a lot of second-guessing. There's a lot of, wondering if your actions are correct or redoing actions. And so the best way to use this energy is to go back, look at loose ends that maybe you haven't tied up, finish up old projects that were, getting dusty on the shelf, or, go back to things that even go back to people that may have had a misunderstanding with you in the past and see if you can't repair that. I mean, all these things are an appropriate way to use that energy rather than to try to start something new and get frustrated by it.
Exactly. And the thing about planets being retrograde is that planets spend most of their time appearing direct, going forward. So we're very programmed to thinking we're going to continually make progress. But you know in life, if you have any experience at all, that we don't always make progress. Sometimes we have to backtrack and go back over the things that we need to address that were forgotten. And that's what retrograde really is. It's a chance to go back. And as we say with Mercury, during Mercury retrograde, it's a great time to clean out the closets, to clean out the cabinets, to go over your desk and find all those things that were forgotten because you moved past them too fast, and now back up and deal with them.
It's not a good time to purchase new communications devices.
No.
Don't get a new computer. Don't get a new phone system.
No.
Don't get any of those things. If you have any choice in it at all. Now, we've had clients who have had to, their phone system went down.
Happens to all of us.
Their phone broke and they had to replace it. Of course, what that means then is you're probably going to go back to the store a couple times, either exchange it or get the repairman out a couple of times or something like that. So try not to, if you have any choice in making that decision, try not to make that decision during the Mercury retrograde.
Now, people have Mercury retrograde in their charts, in their natal charts as well. And what that means is that they have a very active internal communication. They talk to themselves, essentially. They will talk to themselves in the mirror. They will talk to themselves in the room. Hopefully they don't talk to themselves when they're walking around on the streets. But it could happen because they have this very complex internal communication that goes on.
A lot of what we do in our consulting is just validating why you do the things that you do, because we see it in your chart and we say, oh, well, you say, oh, I'm not crazy.
Right. So it's not a bad position. It just points out to what that personality is about, which is so funny because it's so funny from Venus. Venus is, of course, the next planet out from the sun. And Mercury retrograde isn't, I don't think anyone ever sees it as positive. They see it more as tolerable, but not positive. But Venus does retrograde really well. She just loves, like when all the love is turned back on herself.
Well, and think about it. Mercury, there's no internal way to communicate except that self-talk, right? It's an energy that's meant to be emanating out of you. But Venus is your desire to love and be loved, to enjoy comforts, to appreciate beauty and art and good food and all of those things. Those are all internalized energies anyway. So when Venus goes retrograde, she doesn't have to put on makeup.
Right.
She can just,
Just a
lay on the
natural
couch
glow.
and eat chocolates and think, watch romantic movies and, so it's something that Venus does well naturally. And so when Venus goes retrograde, you hardly even notice it.
Right. Except maybe you feel a little more indulgent, self-indulgent.
Exactly. And it doesn't go retrograde that often,
No.
and so you don't have to worry that you're going to put the pounds on.
Exactly. Now Mars, when Mars goes retrograde, there's trouble. And the reason is Mars is a very externalized energy. Mars is your physical body. The two ruling signs relating to it are both Aries and Scorpio. They're very directed. And so when Mars turns retrograde, it's very frustrating for that energy. It's like you get caught in that situation where something's getting you aggravated and you want to be able to break something and you can't. You have to hold it all in, and it's very difficult for Mars. Fortunately, Mars goes retrograde the least of any planet.
That is very fortunate, because if we're contrasting Mercury and Mars, Mercury is primarily an externalized energy, but there are ways to internalize communications. Body language and self-talk and all those kinds of things. Mars is energy, activity, and so there's really no way to internalize Mars. Aerobic yoga in your mindfulness or something. I don't know, but it's much harder.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing that it goes retrograde the least of any of the planets, and it helps you to kind of slow down if you need to be slowed down. I mean, there's always a positive side and a negative aspect of any situation, any kind of planetary movements. And so if you find that you've been running hot, you've been running, this might be a good reminder that you need to find ways to still yourself and be quiet and find mindfulness or meditation, or, it'll be harder. It's hard to rein that energy in when the Mars is direct, but when it's retrograde, if you think about it, you'll be able to use that effectively as well.
Know where Mars comes up in people's charts. Many times people who are healers and heal through touch will have Mars retrograde. And it's because when they touch someone, they will feel the other person's pain. It makes them very, very intuitive. And of course, that's not a large...
In a physical way, which is an interesting...
They feel it through their bodies. Where Venus retrograde many times is found in people who are very artistic. They have an inner sense of beauty and an inner need for balance, which is part of the Venusian quality, that love of balance and harmony. Now, Jupiter, our next guy out, the big guy in the plaid suit. Jupiter, when he goes retrograde, everyone notices because it affects society in a big way. Basically you have Mars, and then you have your asteroid belt, and then you have Jupiter. And Jupiter is kind of out there beyond the walls of your house, so it affects the big financial world. Jupiter and Saturn are the two of the biggest financial players.
Whereas Mercury, Venus, and Mars are very personalized planets. Now we're starting to bridge into the generational world or the outer world. And
exactly.
Jupiter and Saturn are part of that.
Later. Jupiter has a lot to do with appearance. That's why he wears the plaid suit. Right? Now, Saturn...
Well, we call him the plaid suit wearer because if you see pictures of Jupiter with the big spot and the stripes and everything, he looks like he's practically wearing.
That's true.
And what could we possibly say about Saturn retrograde?
Yes, well,
Saturn is already the father, the restrictor, the responsibility, when Saturn goes retrograde, you just feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, like everybody is depending on you, like the whole world is going to stop unless you figure out the way to do. Yeah. It's just, it's, oh, woe is me with Saturn retrograde sometimes.
Yeah, and the thing about Saturn is that there's both a male and feminine side. There's the masculine sign is Aquarius, the feminine sign is Capricorn. So it's also the very strong woman, the matriarch of the family. But Saturn, once again, is a financial planet. So when Saturn goes retrograde, the economy tends to slow down. Now, Saturn is the compressor, where Jupiter is the entrepreneur, the expander. Saturn is the one that says, this is great that you opened up new channels, new pathways. Now let's build the trading posts where we can actually do some business and make it crystallize and turn it into something real. And it's great ideas, let's make it real. You open the pathways, okay, let's put up the gas station where we can make some money from it. And that's the Saturn energy. So when that goes retrograde, you may pull back from this building. You were going to, we were building, suddenly the project got stalled, the money dried up. Saturn just went retrograde.
Yeah.
Now, beyond Saturn, you have, of course, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They're very, very far out there, and they spend months at a time retrograde.
If not years.
If not years. And so this is not something that most people perceive.
So what we do professionally, especially in the area of mundane astrology, which is just like it sounds, it's astrology that applies to like daily life and business and global issues and just kind of the mundane things that have to do with, the world in general. And so when we look at that, we'll say, oh, okay, Uranus is retrograde now. The last time Uranus was retrograde, what did the markets do? Or what kind, what was unemployment doing at that time? Or things like that that are kind of indicators for the global population, or at least our local, the national kind of population, what was going on there. And especially when we see things like a configuration between, a couple of planets that are retrograde, or they're in the same sign and one goes retrograde. We look back historically to see what was happening then in history so that we can kind of get an idea what that might indicate for the current global forecast.
Exactly. So we hope this was helpful, give you a little insight about how retrograde functions and how it affects your life. And
we wish you all planets direct, and we'll see you next time
yes.
for Ralph and Lahni.